Good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar, which is a partnership between NAESP and the Wallace Foundation. The Wallace Foundation has been vested in school leadership and has done incredible research studies which contributed to the content of this webinar today. Improving leadership ranks high on the list of priorities for school reform. And in an expansive survey, teacher quality ranked as #1, but principal leadership came next, outstripping graduation rates, STEM, student testing, and preparation for college and careers. Principal performance is being assessed with new tools in meaningful ways for all of us in the field of educational leadership. Throughout the last decade, the Wallace Foundation has compiled immense knowledge from their research projects, their professional learning communities, and recognizes the complexity of what the principalship means. So let's take a look at these findings. Taking Wallace research to practice, 5 Key Practices of Effective Principals was a publication that Wallace had pulled together from all of their research. The 5 key practices are shaping a vision of academic success for all students, creating a climate, cultivating leadership, improving instruction, and managing people, data, and processes. These 5 key practices have emerged as the critical levers for effective leadership. How we understand the complexity of each of these practices and implement them in schools determines the standards that distinguished principals demonstrate. Traditionally, the principal has been seen as a middle manager, but that has changed greatly over the years. This shift begins with its dramatic changes in what public education needs from principals. They can no longer function simply as building managers, tasked with adhering to district rules, carrying out regulations, and avoiding mistakes. They have to be or become leaders of learning who can develop a team delivering effective instruction. Each of the 5 tasks or key practices needs to interact with each other. Which of these do you think might be most important at your skill level in leading your building? Unless principals can pull all of these 5 things together as levers to compile all of their leadership skills, effectiveness won't occur. It's hard to carry out a vision of student success, for example, if the school climate is characterized by student disengagement or teachers don't know what instructional methods work best for their students, or if test data are clumsily analyzed. But all 5 tasks, when carried out well, leadership is at work. Our 2 speakers today are Susan Holliday, principal in Prince George's County Schools in Maryland, and also Kimberly Washington, who also is a principal in Prince George's County Schools. These 2 outstanding principals will share their journey of leadership, how they view their roles and guide their schools. Both principals in Prince George's County have been involved in the Wallace Foundation work and the Principal Pipeline Initiative. I will share a brief background of each and then turn it over to Susan and Kim to share a profile of their schools. First, we have Susan Holliday. She is a principal at Gladys Noon Spelman Elementary School. Susan has been the principal in Prince George's County for 5 years. She served as an instructional specialist monitoring the instructional programs of 12 K-12 schools and assisting countywide educational initiatives. She's an NAESP certified mentor and has also established an English language learners mentoring program. She's a doctoral student at Bowie State University in Maryland. Susan is a leader in the Wallace Foundation PLC for the county to improve and sustain their district-wide mentoring program. Susan has 2 sons and spends many hours on the sidelines at youth sporting events. Susan, will you share the demographics of your school, please?
Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Susan Holliday. I'm the proud principal at Gladys Noon Spellman Elementary School. I have now been at the school for approximately 7 years. We are a K-6 school, a Title I, school-wide Title I program, and about a third of our students are English language learners. I'm very fortunate to have a fabulous staff that I work with each and every day. We are a departmentalized school in grades 3 through 6, and we are anxiously awaiting the arrival of Park and are knee-deep in getting ready for those preparations. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Our other speaker is Kimberly Washington, and Kimberly is principal at Hyattsville Middle School, again in Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. Kimberly Washington obtained her Bachelor of Arts degree in secondary mathematics education from Norfolk State University. From there, she attended George Washington University, where she earned a master's degree in educational leadership and administration. With a deliberate focus on establishing, supporting, and maintaining a positive school culture hospitable to learning, Ms. Washington has dramatically impacted the school climate at Hyattsville Middle School. Ms. Washington and her staff strive to achieve a school vision of academic and creative excellence cultivated through effort. Kimberly is also an integral member of the Wallace Foundation PLC for exemplary principals. Kim, would you please share the demographics of your school?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kimberly Washington, principal of Hyattsville Middle School. We serve 814 students in grades 6 through 8. We are proud to be in our first year as a Title I targeted assistance school, with 77% of our students receiving free or reduced meals. We are 55% Hispanic, 34% African American, with the remaining 12% Asian, Indian, and Caucasian. Our specialty programs include intensive and inclusion ESOL and special ed. We also have an alternative learning program for students who have not experienced success over time. Lastly, we are one of 3 creative and performing arts middle schools in Prince George's County, with approximately 200 of our students gaining entrance through a rigorous audition process. Next.
As you can see, these principals and their schools represent all of the audience today. And the essential question for our webinar, what specific behaviors can principals employ in creating an environment where these 5 key practices can thrive, will be answered and shared by Kimberly and Susan. An open and transparent environment that promotes adult learning and collaboration will lead to the climate in which everyone is focused and committed to their vision. Susan?
So I am tasked with sharing you regarding the first Wallace practice, shaping a vision for academic success for all students. And there's a quote regarding some of the research that Wallace has done. So when we were talking about what does shaping a vision look like, we wanted to talk about what does it look like actually in the school. You know, Wallace conducted a lot of research, but what does it look like in an actual school? So when I thought about how we created our mission and vision statement at Gladys Spellman, we clearly talked about how it's developed. It's not something that I sat in isolation and said, I wonder what it should look like. I thought back to the state of Maryland, at the time that I was appointed a principal, had a Maryland Leadership Academy for new principals. And during that academy, they actually did a vision and mission building workshop. How do you create that at a school? And what tends to be very this is the first thing that you do. This is the next thing that you would do. And so it was a whole process about what words would you like our school to be known by. Then what words, how do you turn those words into phrases? And how do you turn those phrases into statements? I was amazed at, over the course of, it was almost 2 months that we came up with an amazing mission and vision statement. Along with that kind of came out our school model of respectful, responsible, and ready to learn. And that is something that's on our school letterhead. It's something that's shared with parents. So I think it's important to keep in mind that as much as the vision is revisited every year, and you do want to kind of reflect and say, is it working, what's not working, is an accurate reflection of our school, it is clearly a process that's developed. And I actually did it my second year. I went through my first year as a principal with the current mission and vision statement, and it wasn't until the second year that I did that process with the staff. The next piece is kind of taking a look at how do you begin to build that trust, because, you know, as much as you might be listed as the appointed principal, the reality is the position doesn't necessarily come with all of the trust in the world. So what actions are you going to do to build that trust? And I think one of the first things that comes to mind is they need to know that you're a person, that we make mistakes and we're learning. We arrive and you know, we get ourselves settled in the office, but there is so much that you have to learn as a new principal. It's important to think about the dispositions that you would need to arrive with that type of work, and you need to clearly be in learning mode. And taking the time to listen to what is going on in the building. I always speak to different assistant principals or even some of my teacher leaders that there's rarely educational emergencies. There is usually a lot of time to think about what we need to do. And so I highly encourage you to take the time to think about what you're going to do and then take action. And that will build that trusting relationship with the people that you work with.
Key practice number 2, creating a climate hospitable to education, is essential for all principals. This key practice, unfortunately, may be overlooked if principals are solely focused on increasing achievement. Until school leaders pause to acknowledge their work and responsibility to developing the whole child, it will be impossible to create an atmosphere in which students feel supported. In order for teachers and students to be deeply rooted in the academic and social health of the school, the following must occur. Next. These actions are transparency, deliberate behaviors, feedback, and receptiveness. As a middle school principal who once struggled to create and maintain a school climate that was welcoming, supportive, mutually respectful, my journey leading in a culture of change has been both humbling and rewarding. It began 4 years ago with a clear charge from the district to increase student achievement. I started this work in isolation. Some called me a lone nut. I quickly realized that leading with transparency would gain the support of parents, students, and staff. That transparency led to buy-in, and we began to work as a team in order to implement our deliberate behaviors. And those deliberate behaviors were things like school-wide expectations, norms, procedures. Surprisingly, those deliberate behaviors were focused on improving our school's climate, not student data. We essentially taught our expectations to both students and parents through grade level assemblies, orientation, back to school night, parent conferences. Really, anytime we could mention our expectations, we did. Lastly, we had to brand our message around school climate. Throughout this journey, I was able to ground my work and lean on my work from the Wallace PLC. The message that was very clear to me was that climate and culture really does matter. Next. In this picture, you will notice a fairly young teacher, Ms. Cook. She's actually a second-year teacher. She appears very comfortable with facilitating learning through her hands-on activity. In the background, there are 2 groups of students working independently. And this type of learning and this type of learning environment was rarely experienced before a year ago when we began the work around improving our school culture. Next.
One of the other essential pieces, and Kim briefly touched on it, is this level of transparency, and it should be for both staff and community members, and Kim has spoken about that. People need to know what you're going to do, they're going to follow through, and you need to follow through with what you've said you're going to do. Some of that level of transparency could be around expectations. A lot of times parents are unsure, and especially as new principals are coming in, teachers are unsure. What is she about? What is he going to do? If you're very deliberate and transparent about it, each week I'm going to send you an email that will let you know what's going to happen the next week. They might say, well, I wonder how we're going to know what she's going to do. So being able to talk through and communicating with individuals goes back to that trust, but transparency is very important to be able to share with them what you're going to do, and then obviously, as we all know, following through with the things that we said we're committed to. Next. Briefly touched on deliberate behaviors. As principals, we build climate daily on deliberate behaviors. We should practice it all the time. If we are going to make sure that all the students know that this is a welcoming environment, where do you put yourself at the beginning of the day? How do you greet students and staff? Is it a pattern? Is there a sacred time? I know if you walked into Gladys Spellman on any given day at 8:50, you would see me standing outside the office with my cup of coffee in my hand. And parents know that's where I am. The teachers know if they need to see me in the morning, that's where I am. And through a period of 15 minutes, I greet 500 students. There's an opportunity for me to connect with them. Those are very deliberate behaviors. It's not just to be on duty. I take advantage of the fact that, yes, I have to be on duty and I want to be able to make sure that the students are safe and secure, but at the same time there's an unbelievable amount of climate and culture that is built on just a 15-minute period of time. And within our building, that's a sacred time. A meeting would stop. I typically don't schedule anything during that time period. If a parent asks to speak with me, I would say, can you wait 15 minutes until I finish greeting the students? So these deliberate behaviors I've put into place, and they are sacred times during the course of the day. So to think back to some of that level of communication and building that trust, one of the key areas is deliberate behaviors. Because as Kim has clearly articulated, that climate piece just doesn't happen by chance. It's something that needs to be developed over time, but it is absolutely through deliberate behaviors. Next.
For any new principal or experienced principal, periodic assessments of a school culture and operations are critical. Then action to create a new paradigm of how the work is to be accomplished by a cohesive staff. You might find cracked and ragged edges, just as the stones in the stream represent. You might in a school find immense egos, personal agendas, or a mood to remain status quo. All very difficult barriers for a principal to make change. Think of those opportunities for growth that with time and an intentional leadership can make change. Bringing together the 5 key practices will produce results. Transformation takes place and you are the key. Just as the stream represents rocks that finally become smooth and easy to touch, your school can be the same when you bring together those key practices. All principals have the courage to transform. You do not take on the responsibility of leading a school without courage, as Kim and Susan are sharing with you. Probing, reflecting, gaining different viewpoints, etc. are all important in making that transformation, and they're all possible when you ask the right questions. We know that most of our work as teachers and educators is questioning. Becoming an effective questioner, an effective person that allows other people to reflect on their work is so incredibly important. The principal is good at pulling together all the pieces, not leaving us to feel that we're working in isolation, as many teachers do feel that they're working in isolation.
The last kind of piece that wraps up some of the climate and culture is this notion of receptiveness. And once again, this is for students, for staff, and for parents. As a Title I school, we are asked on numerous occasions to be able to get input from parents. Might be around our school compact, the teachers. You know, how do you feel this one? Any large event in school, I ask for feedback. What I have to open myself up to when I ask for feedback is the actual feedback. Am I willing to receive what they have to say? So I think back to some of the feedback that we get as a Title I school about the budget or parent involvement activities that they would like to see. It is an exercise in futility if I ask for their feedback and I don't, one, don't look at it, or two, find some place to let them know, you know what, that time that you took to give us some feedback, I'm actually going to do. So the same thing goes with teachers. You know, each and every year after we do our back-to-school night, or we do the, I've presented, you know, kind of our charge for the year, that first day of school with the teachers. Before I leave for the day, I send an email. How did it go today? What next year? Because, you know, the reality is every time you do a major event at school, you're already planning for how am I going to do that again? But one piece of that is the receptiveness. If I'm going to ask for their feedback, I have to be willing to listen to what they have to say. Even if I don't even like what they have to say, I have to be willing to be open and receptive to what they are saying. The next key practice is cultivating leadership in others. And once again, we provided you with some of the information that Wallace has shared with you about cultivating leadership. This is clearly one of the practices that took me the longest to be able to embrace. I think as the principal, we feel like we have to do everything, we have to know everything, and a lot of times we have to do everything. And this is a practice that has taken me a little bit longer to embrace. I knew that there were extremely competent people outside the walls of my office, but I felt like I was asking them to do my work. So this is one area that I clearly know has been a very strong growing practice for me this year. Next. And again, what does it look like in school? At Spelman, it looks like a teacher leader group. I have 5 individuals that I meet with each and every Friday morning at 9:30. I send out an agenda on Thursday night, and the focus of that work is both students support and teacher support. And when they develop their schedules each year, I ask them really that notion of what percentage of time would I be spending with students versus what percentage of time would I be working with teachers. And it changes throughout the year, but that is my core group of people that I speak with. They're my buffer. If I have to make a big decision, I go to them and say, well, what do you think about this? But at the same time, the teachers have to be receptive to hearing things from them that doesn't necessarily come directly from me. And that is a practice that's taken time. You know, there are going to be individuals that work in the school that unless the principal says it, it's not going to get done. And so there are some times that I know that I have to say things, but when it comes to their teacher development and some of the next steps and the feedback, I am so impressed by a group of teachers that I work with each week that they now are going to the teacher saying, well, can you come in my room and give me feedback on this piece? So cultivating leadership, because the principalship can be a very lonely position at times, so I feel very blessed this year that I have a group of 5 people that I'm very comfortable being in my own skin in, and I press them to be very open and honest with me, even if I don't want to hear what they have to say, even if they feel like I've made a mistake. So that cultivating leadership is trying to find individuals and tapping them and saying, okay, have you considered trying to lead? I've seen this wonderful feedback chart in your classroom. Can you share that with the rest of the staff? There are going to be individuals that will seek leadership opportunities, and then there are going to be individuals that you probably need to pull along the way and say, you know what, I think you're ready. I think you're ready to share some things. So keep in mind as you're working with people in your building that some of them are going to be very apparent. They're going to probably scream, I'm ready, and then they're going to be those quiet storms that you're probably going to have to pull outside of their comfort area in order to be able to grow them professionally. Next.
As it should be, key practice number 4, improved instruction, is generally on the top of every principal's list. Keep in mind, success in this area only is achieved when Wallace's 5 key practices are implemented together. Once I acknowledged improving instruction could not be accomplished alone, I worked. And I really want to emphasize the word worked because it doesn't just happen without intentional effort. I work to engage my administrators, teacher leaders, and support staff in a process of refinement. When I approached improvement instruction from a lens of refinement instead of change, teachers felt valued and appreciated for all of their past efforts. They truly felt like we were growing together. Next. Content-specific and cross-curricular collaboration is supported in our master schedule. Our teachers engage in 45 minutes of focused professional development during the school day. Our PD theme this year is Teacher as Facilitator. Implementing our weekly PD is our core content collaboration. All 4 core teachers plan together for 60 minutes a week in addition to the weekly professional development. As a team, we come together to observe practice, provide meaningful feedback, and make mid-course adjustments. That took time to get teachers comfortable going into one another's classrooms, took a lot of time and effort. This deliberate practice helped teachers to be comfortable with those peer-to-peer observations, learning walks, and making recommendations for professional development sessions. Next. This picture was taken in our PD room. It's a designated area for professional learning. We decided to focus our school-wide PD on Teacher as Facilitator this year. All teachers, from our world language teachers to the health teachers, math teachers, music teachers, all of our teachers actively engage in weekly learning around Teacher as Facilitator. Next.
The last practice that we'll be sharing with you today is managing people, data, and processes to foster school improvement. This is one of those that you kind of try to put everything together because there is, as much as you're going to interact with people, there's so much information that has to be processed on a regular basis, so being organized is the key area. So you're managing people, you're managing process, you're managing data, but all of it is around student achievement and school growth. So many of the questions that that I ask myself and then I push to the teachers is it best for the kids? It's not what's easiest for you as a classroom teacher. It's not what's convenient. It should be about what's best for children. And many times, especially as we work throughout the school year and we go through those cycles of testing and breaks and all these different things, because the reality is, you know, we're all human and we go through different emotional pieces, is all of these decisions and these management pieces should be around what is best for students. Next.
The best way to ensure a high-performance plan is during the hiring process. We have a 4-step hiring process that I will highlight on the next slide. Quality administrative support and an overall systemic approach will help significantly with the technical pieces of effective managing with people, data, and processes. Next.
3 keys to maximizing impact have been developed by Michael Fullen in his book called The Principle. The three keys are leading learning, district and systems player, and becoming a change agent. One of the most interesting things about this book is how Fullen challenges the status quo and opens up a new and exciting future by systemically laying out what truly effective principals should do. Richard DeFore defined this book in these words: principals are being called upon to serve as instructional leaders who supervise and evaluate teachers and to better performance one at a time. Fullen reveals this strategy for what it is, and Dr. DeFore says a bloody disaster. And provides the specific high-level steps leaders can take to improve their schools. This should be required reading for all principals and those interested in improving education. We certainly recommend that books like this contribute to the professional development of any principal, whether they're new in their career or experienced in their work. There are always opportunities to learn. When you establish purposeful environments, channels of communication are so incredibly important, and you can do that in many different ways. Telling stories, leveraging your knowledge and be clearly focused on the work, and listening to others, truly listening to others, and then incredibly keeping your communication clear and transparent, as Susan and Kim both shared their stories. I do want to share a story with you. One former principal, in reflecting on his experiences, recalled a typical staff meeting years ago at an urban school where morale never seemed to get out of the basement. Discussions centered on field trips, war stories about troubled students, and other management issues, rather than matters like using student work and data to fine-tune teaching. Almost inevitably, teacher pessimism was a significant barrier, with teachers regarding themselves as hardworking martyrs in a hopeless cause. This kind of a scenario is faced in many schools, and principals who do things as Kim and Susan shared, as well as bringing together the 5 key practices, certainly do make the difference. If you don't have the possibility of professional development, then finding your own learning opportunities is so important. To change the kind of climate that was just described by this principal and begin to combat teacher isolation, closed doors, negativism, defeatism, and teacher resistance, the most effective principles focus on building a sense of school community with the attendant characteristics. These include respect for every member of the school community, an upbeat, welcoming, solution-oriented, no-blame professional environment, and efforts to involve staff and students in a variety of activities, many of them school-wide. Principals play a major role in developing the professional community of teachers who guide one another in ultimately improving instruction for all students. We have some questions for both Susan and Kim. So Susan and Kim, we would like you to respond to some questions that some of our listeners have shared with us. One is, and maybe one of you can respond, and the other person can as well. What are some of the first things that you would do to assess school culture? If you were a new principal going into the building, what would be one of the first things that you would do to assess what the school culture is like? Susan?
I think taking a look at the initial culture piece, I think first and foremost, you have to, that has to be gained by independent thought. You know, transition from leader to leader always comes with, well, did you know, and have you heard, and this is the way she used to do it, and I think it's wrong. So I think in order to first get that, you know, barometer of it, you have to be able to look at it through a lens of independent thought. You know, individuals are going to give you some background information, but I think the most important thing is you have to go in with, why am I here, and what is really my sole purpose? And I always look at that twofold. I am here for student achievement. I'm here to build teacher capacity. Some of it is just really listening. Think back to some of those things that Kim and I have talked about receptiveness and feedback and deliberate behaviors, and take a look at how they interact with you. The hardest part is it's not going to be a very, I think, concrete thing. It's going to be something that you're really, if you trust yourself enough to be able to gauge that barometer, it clearly is going to be something that you're going to be able to listen and be receptive and deliberate through some of it. But a lot of it is just really good listening skills at that time.
Thank you, Susan. Kim, what are some of the first things you would do to assess the school culture?
Sure. So first, it's really nice when you are assigned to your school that you can have access to those climate survey results or interview staff over the summer, or even talk to members of the PTA. But for me, even though those things were there 4 years ago, if you do not have a appreciation and an awareness of how impactful school culture and climate can be to your overall success, none of those data points really matter. So for me, it's, going in saying every school has a climate, every school has a culture. What do I want my school's climate and culture to be? How should it look? How should it feel? And you have to start really from day one getting that message out there. So even though some of those data points are available, if the principal themselves does not really focus on that area or express their expectations in that area, they're going to really struggle with that. And I'm speaking from personal experience.
Thank you. Thank you. We had another question come through about branding your school. One of you mentioned in your presentation that as a principal, you brand your school. You kind of create that climate and culture in which everyone feels welcome and invited into the environment. When I was in a position earlier in my career as a supervisor, I supervised principals in about 47 schools. And one of the things that I recognized very quickly was that each school had its own brand. Each school had its own messaging. It had its own feel. And that often was because of the principal's personality. It often reflected what the principal's personal mission and personality was. So for each of you, how would you respond to how you may have branded your school, and what advice you would give principals who haven't really thought a lot about it in terms of branding? And Kimberly, we will start with you.
So firstly, all principals, you will need to brand your school, because if you don't brand it, it will be branded, okay? From community perception, it may be branded from some of your staff members that are speaking within the community, off message. So it is important that you walk in ready to do some of that work. For me at Hyattsville Middle, the branding of the school really came organically. We, of course, want to focus on academic achievement. That's one of our pillars. Our second pillar is around creative expression, because I mentioned we're a creative and performing arts school. And then our third pillar is around cultural responsiveness, because we're such a diverse school. So my advice to new principals, when you go into your building, of course, you need input from all of your stakeholders, but don't try to recreate kind of the wheel. Take those pieces, those nuggets of culture or branding that you already have in your school, and you use that to kind of brand the message that you want your staff to have. Secondly, some branding around just what our expectations of students were. I had to do that in student-friendly language, so that type of branding around our academic excellence came through an equation, and it's really it works really well here for us. Everyone has bought into it, kids say it, parents say it, and that branding equation is success equals will plus effort plus persistence. It is plastered all over the school. We have signs everywhere. It's on our morning announcements. We say it at the end of the day. When we conference with students, the first thing we say, or the first question we ask, is, do you feel that you're being successful? And if they say no, or if their grades or their test scores doesn't show us that they're being successful, we talk in the terms of will, effort, or persistence. And lastly, when we meet with parents, if it's an IEP meeting, it could be just a standard parent meeting to check in how successful their child is. We always talk from the lens of will, effort, and persistence. So whatever your branding is, it just has to be consistent. Your whole staff needs to buy into it. And it really is your responsibility to make sure that message is truly put to all of your stakeholders.
Thank you, Kim. Very, very helpful. Susan, how might you advise individuals about branding their school?
Branding their school. Unmuted. I think, and Kim's touched on it, I think climate and branding is something that really needs to be thought about prior to the principalship. I know as I'm working and mentoring two different assistant principals this year, a lot of it is around that type of work, is creating a climate and creating, really thinking about what your values and beliefs are. And one particular assistant principal said, well, I'm just not sure what school I'm going to be at. I don't know what the school is going to be like. Well, is it going to be a Title I school? Is it going to be a school that has a high ESOL population? You know, and I pressed to that individual, it doesn't matter. What are your values and beliefs? How can you articulate them? It should not be something that you should have to look at a piece of paper. You know, Kim was very clear to be able to share with you what that formula is. And at our school, the respectful, responsible, and ready to learn is something that goes for the teachers. They need to be respectful. They need to be responsible. And they should be ready to learn each and every day when the students are walking in the building. So having those individuals that are aspiring and working in assistant principal roles, that is something I think more than ever, not, you know, the content knowledge of how do you do a budget, or I'm not sure what to do for a teacher observation. All that knowledge can be learned along the way, but if you're not clear about what your values and beliefs are and how you create that climate, that's something that it's hard to practice, but it's really easy to be able to visit as many schools as possible. And what does it feel like in this building? Why does it feel that way? Trying to be able to list and prioritize about what you believe in, because it doesn't matter what school you might eventually work at or one that you work at now, your values and beliefs need to be clearly articulated, both in student-friendly language and then community-friendly language and staff. So all of that comes with just having a clear picture of what your beliefs are.
Oh, thank you, Susan. Great ideas. We do have one more question, and it is around developing leaders in your school. The question was, how do you create leaders when no one steps forward to take what we consider leadership positions? So I guess the question to you would be, how would you define that whole changing concept of the principal as the sole leader of a building to creating a climate where everyone is a leader? And how do you manage your teachers to make them all assume or make them all understand their own leadership capacity? So Susan, can you share with us what you've done to create leaders in your school? What you've done to create school. Unmuted.
I think I briefly touched on this when we were talking about distributive leadership, is even finding a small piece of, as you visit classrooms, and I remember sharing with an ESOL teacher, she had a wonderful feedback form for a bulletin board that she put outside of her classroom, and it was something very simple, but I asked her to share that at a staff meeting. And you have to really take little baby steps, because some teachers say, well, I don't want everybody to, I don't want them, they think I'm going to show off. Absolutely not. It's an opportunity to learn from one another. So there, there might be the quiet storms that are not going to initiate that, but I think finding individuals that you're very specific about what they do well and having them share those things outside of their classroom. Maybe it starts small by just sharing it with their teammates. And then from their teammates, they go to at a staff meeting. But we always are able to generalize, oh, they're such a good teacher. But when you're in asking them to share and to provide some leadership, it needs to be very specific, that then they'll be very comfortable. If I know today I'm going to present information about feedback for student work, oh, okay, I got this, I got this. Here's the example that I did in my classroom. So I would initially ask individuals to share and develop their leadership about something very specific, and then that might build some of their confidence. And at the same time, we've talked about this receptiveness and feedback. They have to be able to be willing to have that type of feedback. And ultimately, if they want to grow, and those are the individuals that you want to choose to work in a school to begin with. Thinking back to what Kim shared about hiring is so critical. Getting those right individuals, and a lot of it is around their dispositions, their values and beliefs. You can teach and to be able to develop teachers on wonderful lessons and different content area, but the reality is their values and beliefs are so important. And many times during that interview process, that's what I focus on. Oh, Mrs. Holliday, I don't know anything about small group instruction. You know what? I can help you through that. But if I can feel and I can ask questions about what they believe in when it comes to students and learning, the rest of it I can support through the development process.
Thank you, Susan. Kim, do you have some ideas that you could share?
For me,
Go ahead.
Sure. For me, developing teacher leadership, so my staff refer to me as the cheerleader because I really try to build on whatever your strength is, because after 4 years, I am very clear that I cannot do this work alone. So if your strength is bulletin boards, then I am just going to celebrate that strength. I'm going to send people your way. I'm going to highlight it. It could be questioning techniques, station teaching, whatever your strength is, especially for those teachers that are reluctant to take a leap into leadership. Some of our teachers perceive leadership as complete ownership, and that's a little intimidating, so it's just baby steps along the way. If your school is departmentalized or you have natural, of course you have your faculty meetings, or if you have professional development days, if you can start to pull teacher leaders into that conversation, have them do some presentations on things that they're comfortable with, that would also help get people out of their shell. Lastly, I really express to my staff that we are a team. Like, everything we do is a team effort. So in my emails, I say, good morning, team, hello, team, on the announcements. So when it's time for me to go to a teacher and say, I notice you do this really well. How do you feel about leading the next professional development? That sense of teaming and collaboration is already out there, and generally teachers would be more willing to do that if you've done the pre-work as the principal to get everyone on board and to celebrate everyone's strengths.
Thank you, Kim. Great ideas from both of you. You've certainly completely answered the questions that have come through in our question box. And you have also developed very clearly the behaviors that you've demonstrated around the 5 key practices of effective principals. So thank you so much for that. To kind of close out this discussion around leadership, I just wanted to share something that I had discovered to change the kind of climate in which you want to create leadership and begin to combat teacher isolation and closed doors and things such as that. Creating a sense of efficacy in the work that the teachers do and a personal responsibility for their work is always been one of those highlights of creating leadership, making their work count and making them feel valued. So Susan and Kim, thank you so much for a wonderful afternoon of sharing your ideas and your expertise. And I would like to thank the audience and hope that everyone at least has walked away with one key idea or more that they can take back to their work on a daily basis. And I also would like to thank at this time the Wallace Foundation for believing in us and believing in principles and the importance of leadership.